Welcome to this tutorial showing you how to create a piece of artwork in response to the artist Maggie Taylor. And you'll see in Photopea I have already opened up a square project by going to New and clicking Print and A4 and then making sure the width and the height were both 297 before clicking Create. So I have my new project. I've also been onto Google and found this vintage photograph of these children, of which I'm just going to take this boy on the left hand side. And the first thing I'm going to do is isolate him. So I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool, and I'm going to draw a mask around him by clicking along the edge of his outline and the chair that he's sitting on. And I'm going quite fast. I would suggest you take your time on this one. I'm just going quick for the tutorial. And obviously taking your time will allow you to get a really nice clean edge around the whole of your figure. In fact, I am not going to make you sit and watch me completely cut this out. I'm going to cut forward and you join me having completely cut out the figure and the chair he's sitting on. And now I'm going to go Control C to copy and Control V to paste him onto his own layer. Okay, I'm now going to use the rectangle select tool just to select the whole of him. Press Control C, and I'm going to go back to my square project and Control V, and there he is. It was quite a small photograph to start with, so he's pasted in quite small, but it's okay. The quality is still there to a sufficient degree when I size him up. But I'm going to Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal to flip him so he's facing the other way instead. And I'm just going to resize him so that I'm happy. Okay, all good. Right, next up we need to think about our background. So I've got this photograph that I took down in Cornwall, and I'm going to take this old ruin and some of the landscape in front of it, and Control C once I've selected what I want, and then back to my project and Control V to paste that in to my project. And then I'm going to use the arrow tool to resize it and reposition it. I'm not worried about the sky because I'm going to put a different sky in, something a bit more moody, but I want to get the land to a place in the piece where I want it. Okay, now I'm going to drag the layer down so I can see where my landscape is compared to my figure. That's looking good. Okay, now I'm going to use the magic wand, and it's just going to allow me to take the major parts of the sky out. So I click the magic wand and then press delete. And then with the rest, I'm just using the rectangle select tool and pressing delete just to get rid of any extra bits that the magic wand didn't manage to get. Okay, and as I said, I found this stormy sky on Google. I've already selected it with the rectangular select and pressed Control C to copy it. Now I've pressed Control V to paste it into this picture. And I'm just going to use the arrow tool to resize it to fill the rest of the background, and then I'm going to drag it down below the landscape. Okay, right, so that's my background in basically. Okay, now I want to begin tweaking it, so I'm going to go to the landscape and go Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation. And I'm going to raise the saturation so it's more colourful. And then I'm going to go image adjustments, brightness and contrast. And I'm going to bring the contrast up and the brightness down a little bit just to make it more dramatic. Click OK. Okay, that's my landscape looking better. Okay. One thing I do want to do is get rid of that kind of bit of coast. So I'm going to just rectangle select that bit of grass and then Control C, Control V to copy and paste it. And then I'm going to drag that little extra bit that I just pasted in up to cover. Okay, right, that is my background looking pretty good. I want to sort out my sky now. So I'm going to make a new layer. And then on that new layer, I'm going to grab the rectangle select tool and I'm going to select the whole of the sky. And then I'm going to make sure I've got a kind of blue, this color blue, medium blue, would you say? And then I'm going to go to the gradient tool and I'm going to make sure I've selected color to transparent, so that second box. And then I'm going to drag from the top of the sky to the bottom of the sky, and it's going to slowly, the more I do it, fill in that area with color to transparent. And then on that layer, I'm going to go to the drop down menu above and select multiply, and that's allowed me to see the clouds underneath. It's a little too dark at the moment though, so I'm going to go image adjustments, hue saturation, and I'm just going to bring the saturation down a bit and bring the lightness up. There we go, looking good. Okay, that's better. Right, so that is my background looking pretty good. So now I need to worry about my figure and turning them into colour. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to start by colorizing the boy's face. Okay, so I'm going to get the polygonal lasso tool and I'm going to go from one side of the face up around the fringe. Again, take your time on this. I'm going a bit faster than I might otherwise do just for the sake of the tutorial. And then I'm going down and around the bottom of his face, so along his collar. And then up and back to the start point. Now you'll see I've gone onto the background. It doesn't matter at the moment. Okay, you'll see why in a minute. And then I'm going to choose a kind of flesh colour. Again, this doesn't matter at the moment. You can always tweak this later, but something like what you want. And then on a new layer, I'm going to grab the paint bucket and I'm just going to fill that mask that I just made in with the paint bucket. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to do two things. I'm going to firstly go to the drop down menu above and go to multiply so I can see the face through it again. And I'm also going to, on that layer I just made, I'm going to right click and choose clipping mask. And that's going to clip the colour to the figure underneath because it's on the layer underneath. Now I can change the colours, so I'm going image adjustments, hue saturation. I'm just going to bring up the lightness and the saturation until I've got a colour that I'm happy with. Click OK. And apart from the eyes, we're looking good. So I'm just going to get the polygonal lasso tool again. And I'm going to draw a mask around this eye. And then I'm going to press delete. And that gets rid of the colour. I'm going to do the same with the other eye. Draw a mask around that eye. Then press delete, and that gets rid of the colour in both the eyes. Right, lastly for the colour, I just want to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And I just want to blur it a bit to get rid of the kind of hard edges around the colour. And that makes it a little bit better blended with the image underneath. Right, next I'm going to do the hair, so I'm going to choose a new layer. And then I'm going to go back to the polygonal lasso tool. And I'm going to do the same as I did with the face. I'm going to draw around the hair, along the edge of the fringe, down the sideburn, and then over the ear. And then the same as last time, I don't need to worry about the background, so I can just go back round to the other side. And that's that masked off. I'm now going to choose a kind of brown for the hair colour. Again, just needs to be basic, because we can tweak it in a minute. And I'm going to use the paint bucket tool to fill in that area. There we go. And then same as before, drop down menu above, click multiply so I can see the hair through. Then right click on the layer and click clipping mask so that it clips it to the photo underneath. Okay. And again, I can go image adjustments, hue saturation, bring up the lightness, bring up the saturation to what I want, click OK. And the same as last time, I want to put a blur on, but because I've already gone filter, blur, Gaussian blur, I can now go filter, last filter, and that puts the same filter on as I used for the skin. Okay, so it makes it a bit quicker. Okay, so that is the skin and the hair done, and I'm cutting back. Now I've done everything in exactly the same way on the boy and the chair, and I have merged those layers together. So rather than put you through having to watch it, I've done it all. Right, now I want to age my photo a bit. So I've got this kind of grungy, dirty, transparent layer that I found on Google, and I'm rectangular selecting it, pressing Ctrl C to copy it, and then Ctrl V to paste it into this project. It's quite a subtle layer, but it will add to the kind of vintage feel of your piece of work. And I'm just using the arrow tool to make it the size of the image. And then I'm going to go to the drop down menu above, and I'm going to choose multiply for this one as well. Makes it a little bit darker, but I want it darker still, so I'm going to go to that layer, right click and click duplicate layer. So I've got two of those layers now, so it makes it slightly darker. I also on Google found this image. I typed in dirty frame, and I'm using the rectangle select just to select the inside of that frame, pressing Ctrl C to copy it, and then going back to my project, Ctrl V to paste it in, and then using the arrow tool to resize it to the edges of my project. And the same as the other dirty layers, once I've resized it, I'm going to go to the drop down menu above and click multiply, and that is going to make it transparent and blend in with the layers below. So I now have this really kind of aged vintage feel to my piece of work. I'm also just going to bring the opacity down. I don't want it to be too dark, so it's a little bit lighter with the opacity down on that layer. Okay, right, that's the image coming together nicely. But now I've got the background in, I feel like my boy could be a little bit more colourful, so I'm going to go to his layer and go image adjustments, hue saturation. I'm just going to bring up the saturation a bit and bring the lightness down a bit, I think. Yeah, that's better. Okay, that's a bit more fitting now. All right, I'm also going to go image adjustments, brightness, contrast, and just whip up the contrast. I think bring the brightness down a bit, just a tiny bit. That's good. Okay, so now I feel like he fits a bit better. These little tweaks will often have to happen. Right, so now we're going to make our image a little bit more fantastical. So I've decided I'm going to take his head off. So I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool just to cut round the bottom of his face and along his collar, and then up and around and back to the start point. And this is important. I'm now going to press Ctrl C to copy it, but then I'm going to press delete to get rid of it. And then I'm going to press Ctrl V to paste it back in, but this time it's on its own layer, which is what I want. Okay, so it has to happen in that order. All right, I'm then going to bring the head up to the top so I can work with it. and I'm just going to rotate it a little bit so it looks like it's floating away. And I want it to look like he's holding his head, like his head is a balloon. So what I've done is I've gone onto Google and found this picture of a balloon, because I just want this little bit at the bottom, the kind of tied up rubber end. So I'm just going to use the polygonal lasso tool. I'm just going to cut round that. Again, I'm being quick. You take your time because you're not doing a tutorial. Okay. And then once I'm back, I'll press Control C to copy it and then go back to my project and Control V to paste it in. And you can see it's pasted in right there in the middle. Very small. And then I'm going to drag it up. I don't think I need to resize it. And I'm going to plop it just there. Now, while I'm zoomed in, I've noticed that there's a little bit of collar around my boy's head that I'd like to get off. So I'm going to go back to the head layer, just get the polygonal lasso tool and just trim along the edge of his chin and cheek a little bit better than it was. There we go. Go round and then press delete, and that's going to get rid of that light collar there. Right, now I can go back to making this look like a balloon. Okay, so I'm going to go Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation, and I'm going to mess around with the hue to get something a little bit more the right color. Bring the saturation down. There, it's looking good. I'm kind of looking for the kind of flesh color to match the face. Okay, you'll need to tweak this however you are doing it. Click OK, and that's looking good. I just want a little bit of shadow around that to add to that balloon effect. So I'm going to choose very dark brown, and I'm going to go and grab a new layer, and I'm going to get the paintbrush and just paint one bit. There you go, just above the rubber bit. And then I'm going to use the Gaussian blur again, so it's a bit blurred. And then I'm going to get rid of it off the background by right-clicking on that layer and going to the clipping mask again, so it's only on the head. Okay, it's a little bit dark at the moment though, so I'm just going to bring the opacity down on it. There we go, that looks good. Okay, and then if I zoom out, you can see it looks like I've got a balloon head, and I just want to make a string come from the head to his hand. So I'm going to use the free pen tool and make sure that there is no fill and that the stroke is black. And then I'm looking for about 6 pixels wide and the tolerance to be nice and high. And then I'm going to draw from the balloon to his hand a nice wiggly line. Okay, and I'll just deselect it so you can see it without the blue line. There you go, that's that wiggly line looking like he's holding his head as a balloon. Okay, but now we need to replace the empty neck. So I'm going to use the free pen tool again, and I'm going to draw kind of the rest of the neck in, and then down and around back to the start point. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to fill the neck in with white. Well, kind of just off-white really, slightly light grey, and then do the same with the stroke. And then I'm going to right-click on that layer and rasterize it so it's no longer a live shape. I've then dragged it underneath the body, and I'm just going to use the arrow tool just to resize it so it fits nicely in with the rest of the collar. Okay, then I'm going to double click on that layer, and I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to put an inner shadow on it, and I'm going to change the angle and the opacity and distance and size to what I think makes a good shadow. And then also going to put an inner glow onto it so that it fills the rest of that shape with a slight edge of darkness. Okay. I'm also just right clicking and rasterizing the layer style on that to set it in stone. You don't have to do that, but I have. Okay. Right, as in all digital pieces of work, I've now got to a point where I want to tweak a little bit again. In this case, the land. And I'm going to go Image Adjustments, Hue Saturation again. And I just want to up the saturation of the land a bit and bring the lightness down a bit. Okay, this will happen as you form your picture. You'll see things you want to tweak. It's absolutely fine. Okay, right, now I want to add some extra features. In this case, some butterflies. So from Google, I found some nice pictures of some butterflies. And I have, as I'm doing here, just magic wanded the background and pressed delete to get rid of the background. And then I'm using the rectangle select tool to select the whole of the butterfly, pressing Ctrl C to copy it, and then Ctrl V to paste it in. And there it is. Okay, nice big image this time. And I'm just shrinking it down, pressing Shift while I do that. And I go to that layer, bring it up to the top so I can work on it more easily. And I'm just going to rotate it and shrink it down until I get it to the size and position that I want it to be in. Okay, I'm just going to zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to go Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, whip up the saturation so it's nice and bright, bring down the darkness a bit, and that's that butterfly done and dusted. So I'm now going to grab one of my other butterflies. Same again, rectangle select the whole of the butterfly, Ctrl C to copy it, go back to my piece of work, Ctrl V to paste it in. There it is if I zoom out. And same as before, arrow tool to resize and position. And I'm going to zoom in on this one as well so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. And Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation again. Bring up the saturation, bring the lightness down a bit. I think I'm going to change the color as well to something else. Oh, that red's nice. Okay. And then lastly, I think I'm just going to rotate that as well. Want to make them feel like they're flying, so a bit of rotation there. Okay. And I'm going to press Ctrl V again so that I've got that same butterfly back because I want to use that butterfly again. This time I'm going to put it resting on the boy's lapel, I think. And yeah, it's looking nice. Again, I'm going to zoom in so I can see what I'm doing. And so you can see what I'm doing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on that layer and I'm going to add a little bit of drop shadow and change up the distance and the size, the opacity and the angle to something that makes it look like the butterfly's got a shadow underneath and that it's resting on the boy. And you'll have to play with these until you're happy, but that looks good to me. Okay, and I'm just going to make him a little bit smaller so he's more appropriate to the size of the boy. Okay, all good. Right, next butterfly. Rectangle select tool, select the whole butterfly, Ctrl C to copy, Ctrl V to paste him in. Oh, he's a good size already. And I'm going to have him resting on my boy's leg. Okay. Just zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. And just reposition him. Right, and we've already got the shadow under this one, so I'm going to right click and go Layer, Style and Copy. And then I'm going to go back to my new butterfly, layer, style and paste. And it's pasted the same shadow underneath the second butterfly, which is saving me some time. Okay. I now want to use the yellow butterfly again, so I'm going to click on that yellow butterfly, right click on that layer, duplicate the layer, and then I can move that new butterfly layer somewhere else, in this case on the boy as well, over the other side, resting on his other arm, and using the arrow tool to shrink and rotate as before right clicking on that layer and doing layer, style and paste, so I've got the shadow. I'll just zoom in so you can see that, and I can just shimmy it to a place where I want it to be. There we go. And I think I'm going to change the colour on that one too. So once I'm happy with the positioning, I'm going to go Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation, and just mess around with the hue until I get a different colour. There we go, looking good. Okay, right, I'm going to cut away, and now you've come back and I have cut and pasted a whole load of other butterflies in and used hue and saturation to change their colours. And as is always the way, having done that, I now think my sky's too dark, so I'm going to go back to that blue layer and I'm going to go Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation, and I'm just going to bring up the lightness a bit more. That looks better. Okay, I'm also going to go to the dirty border that I used, and I'm just going to bring the opacity up a little bit now, just to make it a bit darker. And I think after those little tweaks, that is this piece done and dusted. I hope you find this tutorial helpful.